What would you like to eat?
In a little pocket.
Ah! Fire! Hey, hey! Oh, hey! On.
At the beginning of the film, we are introduced to a brutal and bloody arena filled with fierce fights between women. However, the contestants here are not just any women, but the best fighters from around the world with trained bodies and attractive appearances. Every brutal attack that lands in the fight makes the male audience around the arena scream even more hysterically. Among all the fighters, there was one blonde girl who stole the show. At first, she only participated by accident, but make no mistake, she turned out to be a dangerous opponent. What was even more surprising was that 3 months earlier, this girl was just an ordinary hotel maid named Jane. Because of her beautiful face and attractive body, she was often harassed by thugs who wanted to molest her. But that was a big mistake. When a man tried to grope her, Jane quickly fought back.
In a little pocket.
Ah! Fire! Hey, hey! Oh, hey! Get him up! Pack up your stuff, Jane. I don't want you back here.
This was the third job she had lost in a month because she couldn't control herself when treated unfairly. The man Jane beat up couldn't accept the shame, so he and his gang waited for Jane in the parking lot to ambush her. But Jane wasn't someone who could be treated lightly. She stood up and kicked the man's groin provocatively, then proceeded to beat up anyone from the gang who dared to approach her. She even caught a man who tried to escape and beat him unconscious. Jane's courage was not without reason, as she had been practicing martial arts with her father since childhood. More than 10 years ago, her father, who was a fighter, came to Hong Kong to participate in a competition, but since then he had disappeared without a trace. Deep down, Jane has always worried about her father's disappearance. Now that she has grown up and become stronger, she has decided to pack her bags and head to Hong Kong with the intention of investigating the reason for her father's disappearance. After saying goodbye to her mother, she set off for Hong Kong. However, as a newcomer to this unfamiliar city, Jane was completely unaware of the dangers that awaited her. As soon as she got off the bus, a group of local thugs tricked her and took her to a deserted location. Jane finally realized that they intended to steal her belongings, and she immediately fought back. She managed to fight off several people, but there were too many opponents and she couldn't handle them all alone. That's when a woman saw the injustice happening on the street and stepped in to help Jane. In her dazed state, Jane only had time to see the woman defeat the thugs. Then everything went dark. When she came to, Jane found herself in a temple. The woman who saved her turned out to be Master Shu, a member of the Hong Kong branch of the Wudong sect. During her recovery, Jane worked diligently at the temple, keeping it clean without ever complaining, even feeling pity for a dead bird. And Shu noticed all of this. 5 years earlier, Shu had participated in an underground competition, and in the final battle, she faced a female student from Shaolin. Their fight was fierce, and there was no clear winner. However, because her opponent was unable to divide the prize fairly according to the committee's decision, it was decided that each of them had to find a female disciple to represent them in the next competition to determine which of them was superior. For almost 5 years, Shu had been searching for the right female student, and now with only 3 months left until the competition, Jane had appeared by chance at the venue. Besides finding the cause of her father's disappearance, Jane's other goal was also to participate in the competition. However, with her fighting skills at that time, she was definitely not the student Shu had hoped for. And if Jane truly wanted to participate, all that awaited her was death. Hearing this, Jane intended to leave, but Shu then decided to follow her destiny. She said that if her destiny could save a dying little bird, then she would make Jane her disciple and include her in the competition. With her martial arts skills, Shu performed a complex Wudong sect movement, infusing energy into the bird's body, and before Jane's eyes, the little bird came to life and flew away. Although it looked real, it was all just an illusion. But from that moment on, Shu began training. This was the beginning of a 3-month special training. And as the saying goes, when legs are unsteady, martial arts are also unsteady. The first step for Jane was to practice horse stance every day, regardless of rain or wind, starting from the moment her eyes opened in the morning. For a beginner, the training was very difficult. After 2 months of intense training, Jane's Wudong Kung Fu skills improved rapidly. Her strength also increased, although she was still far from Shu's level because she was unable to ring the big bell with just one hand. Meanwhile, at the Shaolin Martial Arts School, a mysterious girl appeared. She entered the training room arrogantly and challenged 10 people at once. One of the tall, large female students tried to fight her. However, she was immediately overwhelmed by the girl's extraordinary strength. It was then that the Shaolin realized that the mysterious girl was the perfect replacement student to be entered into the underground competition. The girl's name was Ling, and she was a wanderer. She was offered a place to stay, food and training for 3 months with the guarantee that she would become stronger, so much so that even experienced warriors would be unable to defeat her after her training. Ling accepted the offer, and 3 months passed quickly.
Strike the enemy.
The underground competition held every 5 years finally began. The contestants are selected female fighters from all over the world, and they are all ruthless fighters. After signing the death warrant, the match officially began, and Jane's first opponent was a Taekwondo fighter. Her opponent's kicking skills were undoubtedly formidable, and the flurry of kicks briefly swayed Jane, giving her opponent the opportunity to land a fatal blow. However, Jane took a deep breath, calmed herself, and began to control her opponent's rhythm. Jane's skills were actually much better, but for a first match, she was still a bit stiff. Once she gained control, Jane managed to kick her opponent out of the ring and win the match. On the other side, a muscular female fighter took the stage. Her muscles were so massive that she looked more masculine than a man's, and her opponent was a calm-looking girl. Unexpectedly, with a single punch, the calm girl was able to knock out her large opponent. Match after match unfolded, and each showed their special strengths. Jane truly felt the tension of the arena, especially when a ferocious fighter named Svieta appeared. Even when her opponent was down, Svieta continued to attack relentlessly, kicking her opponent's head until it was badly injured. The last match of the day was Ling from Shaolin against her opponent. And with her trained fighting skills, Ling quickly knocked her opponent out of the arena, ending the first round. The winners got a break, but Jane didn't sit still, because she was now looking for the thugs who had stolen her wallet. Armed with the martial arts skills she had learned, she mercilessly beat them up and managed to get her father's photo back.
You mean this?
However, Shu caught her in the act and became very angry because the skills she had taught were being used to beat people up. So Jane was expelled and was no longer considered a student. Lost in confusion, Jane stared at her father's photo, and accidentally found a business card from the committee member she had previously met at the arena. Jane then met the man who was known as Sang and showed him her father's photo. Sang recognized Jane's father and said that 10 years ago, Jane's father had indeed participated in the competition, but suddenly disappeared before the final match. Unfortunately, when Jane wanted to know more, Sang refused to give an explanation. The next day, the second round began with weapons combat, and as soon as the bell rang, the first match began. A fighter in white with a spear immediately dominated the arena against her opponent, armed with nunchaku. The nunchaku were only effective at close range, while the spear kept her opponent on the back foot. However, the nunchaku wielder suddenly turned the tables counterattacking and knocking her white-clad opponent out of the arena. Now it was Jane's turn to fight against an opponent wielding a large sword, and she also chose a similar sword. The fight was fierce, and Jane seemed to be on the back foot due to her opponent's superior strength. However, she eventually took advantage of an opening in her opponent's attack by kicking her in the back and knocking her down. While her opponent was still dazed, Jane kicked her unconscious, ultimately winning. The next match was between Sveta and Cassidy, Jane's new best friend. Sveta arrogantly threw away her sword, and with one blow, she broke Cassidy's arm and then brutally beat her. When Cassidy tried to surrender by crawling out of the arena, Sveta then drew her sword and slashed Cassidy's neck until Cassidy finally died before Jane's eyes. Her only friend died tragically, leaving Jane devastated and devastated. But what was worse was that Jane's next opponent was Sveta.
Hey, doctor!
Despite her fear, Jane tried to calm herself. Ling, meanwhile, was also battling fiercely in the semifinals and ultimately prevailed. Now it was Jane's turn to face Sveta, and with determined eyes, Jane tried to remain calm under her opponent's brutal attacks. She was knocked down and beaten to a pulp. Everyone thought Jane was dead, but she rose again. This time she attacked fiercely, beating Sveta relentlessly until her opponent was helpless and finally defeated. When she returned to the waiting room, Sang then appeared and revealed that 10 years ago, Jane's father also made it to the finals, but was killed by him to win a bet. Now he intends to repeat the same thing to Jane, but seeing Jane injured and weak, he postpones his plan. A badly injured Jane comes to Shu to beg for healing so she can avenge her father's death. At first, Shu refused, but then she remembered the words written on a photo left behind by Jane's father, which said that what the devil needs most is to turn good people evil. Shu then realized that this time, she couldn't let Sang win. She healed Jane overnight and the next day accompanied her as her coach in the final. When Sang saw that Jane had recovered, he became anxious. The final match began pitting Jane against Ling. Due to her severe injuries, Jane could only defend herself and continued to be hit without being able to fight back. Everyone thought she would lose until she finally saw the shadow of her father encouraging her. Jane then got up, forgot the pain, and launched a counterattack. She unleashed attack after attack until finally her last kick knocked Ling into the lake. Jane finally emerged victorious, while Sang looked panicked and tried to escape but was successfully captured. All of his crimes had now been exposed, including his involvement in the death of Shu's relative. However, killing Sang would not change anything, so he was eventually handed over to the authorities. The long-standing conflict between Wudong and Shaolin has finally come to an end, and now the two sects are reunited, recruiting more disciples to train together. And the film ends.